Giving upgrades to previously existing software on the old Nintendo Switch and giving them upgrades on the Nintendo Switch 2 was exactly what I wanted for this console. It may have not been in the way that we got with this, but it is still an upgrade nonetheless. And for the most part, they're handling them quite well. For the most part. But we're not going to go over the negatives today. Today, we're going to be going over the Nintendo Switch 2 editions that we needed yesterday. Now, whether or not these games need a full-on Nintendo Switch 2 update or a Nintendo Switch 2 re-release edition, I'll be sure to clarify. But needless to say, the first-party titles that I'm going to be bringing up today are games that I think desperately need these updates. Maybe not so much desperately, but I think deserve these updates. But now, with this first one, I'm going to shoot my shot in the dark a little bit here. I watched a lot of videos in regards to speculation in regards to what Nintendo Switch 2 editions people want, and I don't see anybody talking about this, and I think it's kind of likely that we might get this pretty soon. So we're going to start out with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Now, if we weren't getting Age of Imprisonment later on into this year, I probably wouldn't be bringing this title up, but I think Nintendo holds these games in a pretty high regard. And obviously, if I'm bringing up Age of Calamity, there is an argument to be made that the original Hyrule Warriors deserves a Nintendo Switch 2 edition, but I already think that game runs pretty well, all things considered, and I don't think it really shares any importance or significance. Whereas Age of Calamity, the game runs really poorly, and it shares a huge significance in the Breath of the Wild universe, and I think it needs to run better, especially because I think it's going to be relevant again when Age of Imprisonment comes out. I mean, the fact that they gave Switch 2 editions to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I think Nintendo really values this, I don't want to call it a trilogy, the Wild series, I guess, if you want to call it that. I just think it would be a little weird if they drop Age of Imprisonment and it runs at a buttery smooth 60 frames per second, and let's say, oh, you know, here's a fan who wants to marathon the entire Wild era of series, and then they get to Age of Calamity, and yeah, the frame rate is just killing them. And so I could totally see Age of Calamity getting a Switch 2 edition. Hell, I even see it getting a full-on re-release and some Switch 2 edition content. Maybe that's a little crazy, but again, with Age of Imprisonment on the horizon, I think it's possible. And we've seen with Kirby and the Forgotten Land that it is not out of the ordinary to get content for a game that was way past 3 years old. So maybe I'm crazy, but I'm putting it down here anyway. So if I end up being right, y'all better come over here and pat me on the back or something. I don't know. However, the next one on my list, though, I don't think it's going to get a Nintendo Switch 2 edition. I think it's going to get a software update, and that's going to be Mario and Luigi Brothership. Now, I think a lot of people forgot about this, but yeah, the game kind of does chug a little bit. Not like in a way where it's happening all the time, but specifically on the ship that you're riding on, especially if you fast sail it or you're running around on the place, and especially the end game, is one of those frame drops that doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, you notice it, and it bothers you. And so I can totally see Mario and Luigi Brothership getting some love here. Again, maybe not a full-on Nintendo Switch 2 edition, because a lot of people forget you cannot just throw a Switch 1 game onto the Switch 2 and expect it to run better. I mean, sure, it's going to hit its frame rate caps and it's not going to dip as much, but you need a proper Switch 2 update to make these games run better, to make them hit their intended frame rates and stay at the frame rates consistently. It would be cool if you could just throw a game onto the next thing and have it run good, but they have caps in place. They have resolution caps in place. Specifically so they don't overclock and, you know, mess up your console, which is an amazing segue into the Xenoblade series. Now, I'm only going to be talking about 5 games in this list, but, you know, I'm going to cop out here a little bit and say the entire Xenoblade series. Now, oddly enough, Xenoblade 3 did get an update. I don't know what it was. I'm looking at it right now, and it seems like the most inconsequential thing I've ever seen. So let's just pretend that didn't happen, and let's say we need to give this whole series a Switch 2 update. Now, I would love to see them all get Switch 2 editions. I don't think that would ever happen. And to be honest, I don't know what content they would add to these games that they don't already have, especially if they end up charging for more content. I don't know. I definitely see them just giving them software updates. The games are still relevant. The games are kind of complete as they are, and I've been kind of dancing around it, but kind of one of the main reasons that the Xenoblade series needs a Switch 2 update is because the resolution is so bad, and it was manageable on the Switch 1 console, and honestly, I didn't even notice it for the most part, but now that we have the Switch 2 and it can display at a higher resolution, yeah, you can start to notice the shortcuts that Monolith took to get these games to run on the console, and it's very impressive looking back on it. But for the Switch 2, Yeah, I don't know. Now that my eyes are adjusted to DK Bananza and Mario Kart World, I would like to see that same treatment for these games as well. I don't even think their frame rates need to be necessarily adjusted. Xenoblade 3's kind of chugs a little bit when you use Ouroboros forms, but for the most part, it's really just resolution buffs. I just want to be able to see these games in crisp, high definition video. And yeah, funnily enough, these games aren't even in HD. There's a video I will give a shout out to and point you all to if you're more curious about that. Apparently, none of these games are in HD, and I think that is mad funny. They all run at 60, I think, but they do not run at 1080p, except Xenoblade X, which I think is hilarious, and that's why I'm not really including Xenoblade X here. It's just the trilogy that needs an update so badly. Definitely check out this video. They know what they're talking about. I do not. But transitioning into something I can actually talk about, Nintendo Switch Sports. Am I a little crazy to say I could totally expect them doing a Switch 2 edition of Switch Sports? I mean, Switch 2 Sports, I think, sold relatively well, despite what people have said about it, including myself. I just think that if they gave this game another chance, and they actually included a ton of sports this time around, instead of the random ones like Chimbara. I mean, I like Chimbara, but where's our baseball and boxing, you know? I think if they locked in and gave this game another chance, I'd be more than willing to give it another shot, as well as just making the game run better, maybe getting rid of the stupid, like, live service. It wasn't even really a live service. It was just like a limited time, like, FOMO, get these clothes or you're kind of screwed. It was so weird. It was like a half step between being Fortnite and a half step not, because it's, you know, Nintendo, and they don't want to make you pay for in-game cosmetics, so it was so weird. But I totally see a Switch 2 edition going back and fixing this, as well as just, again, adding new content, adding new sports. I could totally see them going back, fixing this game, as well as, you know, putting it out there for a new generation of fans to play, because it's Switch Sports. It's the game. It could have been a packing title for Switch 2 and the Switch 1. You could have made like Switch 1 bundles with this game, but nope. So I can totally see them just reselling it again if they feel like it. But hey, you know, if they did do that and they did that relatively soon, then you would have a new, technically new Nintendo Switch Sports at the beginning of the generation. So I don't know, just food for thought. And finally, to end it off here, I'm copying out again. I'm going to say that there are two 2D Mario games that are very likely to get a Nintendo Switch 2 edition. And yeah, I think it's going to specifically be a 2D Mario game. I think it's either going to be Mario Maker 2 or Mario Wonder. Now, let's start with Mario Maker 2. Mario Maker 2, I could definitely see a Mario Maker 3 happening. But in the case that it doesn't happen, I could totally see them reselling Mario Maker 2 as a full-on Nintendo Switch 2 edition, physical edition and all, with new content. And funnily enough, I could totally see them including Mario Wonder as an extra style. Now, it doesn't even have to necessarily be Mario Wonder. It could be anything. But the fact that extra styles menu exists and only Mario 3D World is the only option there, it still bothers me to this day. But needless to say, I think Mario Maker still has a place in the modern Nintendo sphere. I could totally see them bringing back Mario Maker 2. And I mean, yeah, sure, there's a lot of ideas that they can introduce with a third game, but I don't know if they have many right now, and I think they want to promote Mario Wonder. But if they don't want to make a Mario Maker 3 right now, I can totally see Mario Maker 2 being the best bet. It's kind of the same thing with Smash Ultimate right now, in the sense where they could totally make a new game, or they could keep updating Ultimate, and honestly, either or, I think most people would be fine with it. So it's your move, Nintendo. But Mario Wonder, on the other hand, the game never received any DLC, and I wouldn't have brought it up if it weren't for Kirby and the Forgotten Land obviously getting DLC a couple years after its launch. And so I think Mario Wonder is on the table. If they don't want to update Mario Maker and give it more stuff to do, as well as possibly giving it the Mario Wonder style, then I could totally see them going back to Mario Wonder and giving it a massive DLC as well as re-releasing it. I mean, Mario Wonder is still pretty relevant, I would argue. And again, no DLC whatsoever, and it's the current 2D platformer out there. I really think it's a toss-up between Mario Maker 2 and Mario Wonder. Whichever 2D Mario platformer they want to go with, they could totally go with, or we could totally get both. Honest, again, it's Nintendo. It's your move. It's your move, Nintendo. Let me know what kind of Nintendo Switch 2 editions you would like to see, whether it be a full-on physical release or just a software update, and what kind of things you would like to see in these content updates. Stay hydrated, stay cool. I'm going to go back to playing DK Bananza. You all have a good one. See ya.